ball is held by one or more opponents. Then, one or more of the ball carrier's teammates bind on to the ball carrier. All the players involved are on their feet and moving toward the goal line. Open play has ended and a maul has been formed.
Welcome to the Mean Potatoes Podcast. Today I'm joined by Randall Belknap, who is the Regional Vice President of U.S. Public Sector Sales, Federal, State, and Local Government, Higher Education at Checkmarks. How are you, Randall?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Garrett.
Thanks for joining from across the country. You're in the Shenandoah Valley, right?
That's correct. Just outside of Washington, D.C.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Let's let the viewers and the listeners know what Checkmarks is, and then we'll kind of zero in on some of the cool products that we'll talk about during this podcast.
Sure. Checkmarks is a global software security company headquartered just outside of Tel Aviv, Israel, founded in 2006. We're privately held by Hellman and Friedman Corporation as of March of last year, 2020. We specialize in automated software security. We're working with application developers to be able to identify vulnerabilities in source code. We address that from the standpoint of both from a static as well as also an interactive testing platform, as well as also incorporating embedded training to be able to help developers develop best of class code.
All right, very cool. And you guys have a lot of products that you roll out, and who are some of the companies that use your product? A couple of the brands that benefit from it.
So certainly your household names from a commercial and global perspective, typically all your major financial institutions, but specifically in the public sector space where I leave, all the major commands in the Department of Defense, Homeland Security, civilian agencies, and a number of state and local agencies across the U.S. And even our software is even used in the classroom at 3 universities here in the U.S.
All right, so as mentioned in your title, you sell to a lot of public institutions and agencies. That comes with some benefits, and then it might be a little bit burdensome and take a while. If you could give a brief description of what it's like to sell to those entities for the listeners.
Well, first and foremost, public sector has been in my blood all 50 years of my life, being a military brat. So I don't know no other than public sector, an Army brat, and serving in the U.S. Air Force. I took on a career of public sector sales just out of college 26 years ago now. The areas of within public sector, you have the civic duty of being able to help our country be able to develop the best line of defense against the bad guys, but also enabling agencies, universities, municipalities to be able to develop better products to be able to serve the citizen. The downsides, clearly, as we all faced last year, is in times of crunches, funding can be routed to mission critical, setting up Zoom calls versus being able to develop an application. So it is an area where you do have very dedicated, loyal customers once you've proven your technology, but it's also an area where there's a continued investment to be able to develop applications or tools for applications that are specific to this industry.
So this is really interesting because there's 8 billion people on the planet, and a lot of those ones are not good, and they happen to be smart and nefarious, and they like to attack things and throw monkey wrenches into it. So if you had a time machine, you mentioned it's been in your blood for 50 years. And there's so many different languages and networks and connectivity. Do you think if you could go back 50 years and set a framework with all the knowledge that you have now, that that would be more secure, or do you think there's always going to be ways that people find and hack and try to break stuff?
Well, if I'd have gone back 50 years, there have been a few stocks that I would have bought along the way that certainly would be very beneficial today. But I don't know that you can effectively have established a particular programming language or even an application that would prevent all. I think if I were to go back in time, it would be able to establish better process of how applications might be developed. So much the challenge that we face today that could be mitigated by really the life cycle of developing technology is there's such a demand for having something in production, having it being used, that if it works, it's quickly put into production versus did we check to see that it was ironclad, defendable against intrusion. So again, I think if anything, it's to be able to establish better process in the beginning of a technology versus the triage after the fact, after it's being developed.
Yeah, that makes sense. So a little bit more about that process. With your clients, do the ideas of, we have a problem, can you guys come up with a solution? Does it originate with the clients, or does it originate with you guys and you build it and then present it to the various clients as like, here's a solution that we think would work for XYZ?
So Garrett, that would be all the above. In the different areas is you quickly will hear about a breach of an application being hacked into. Those customers or prospects or clients would be quick to they would be looking to buy a technology, adopt a technology to mitigate the risk that it's already exposed, right? So in other words, where it be a ransomware or something like that. That's after the fact. That's reactive versus our approach is proactive, meaning that is to identify those vulnerabilities before it ever goes into production, and even when it's in production, being able to help identify, what has changed during the life cycle of the application being developed.
Yeah. And so the pressure's pretty big for companies like you that it's not your pizza gets delivered 30 minutes late because of some glitch. It's national security and infrastructure and important stuff that would affect millions of people, theoretically, maybe even billions. What do you guys do to ensure that your process internally is as ironclad as possible?
So as the age-old saying is the earlier the better in the process of the planning, the better. Very much so is when an application is being drawn out on a whiteboard is this is the end state, what we want it to do. We want it to be able to allow a consumer to be able to check their Social Security benefits, right? And find out where their check might be. Well, if all of a sudden that application wasn't thought about in terms of what system or platform that it was going to be hosted on, and as well as what coding language was used, was the code inspected for vulnerabilities ahead of time. These are all things that downstream the consumer, yourself and myself, we want to know where our benefits are. We're not real concerned about the fact is what language it was coded in, or or whether it was protected from vulnerabilities. The expectation from the consumer is the application works perfect. It works all the time, 99.99 whatever percent, and that puts a lot of pressure on the business that's supporting it to be able to ensure that the application is up and running and is not vulnerable from an attack that would cause the system to crash.
Yeah. So I imagine at some point you've got the product and you sell it and you press go. Those are probably a few nervous hours, minutes, or even days when you've onboarded and implemented a new product, right?
If you wait till you've built the application and then you run it, hold your breath for a little while. If you've
Yeah.
done it correctly and you've implemented the tool and used it from the get-go, and you're using it continuously throughout the development of the application, you've raised the confidence that the application will not have challenges and will not have vulnerabilities. So it's an ongoing insurance policy is almost the best way to put that. So and it's an area where painfully it's an afterthought, and it's, oh gosh, I wish we would have checked it for this or that, or how did no one catch that? And then it's a finger pointing contest of, well, we didn't have the funding to be able to buy the tools to to inspect the software, or we didn't know that was even something we should do. We were under such a pressure to get the application up and running that we didn't have time, didn't have the expertise, and so that leads to another challenge. Is you may have a developer developing an application that has the end state in mind of developing the application, but may not have the whereabouts or the best practices to be able to inspect the code as you go.
Yeah. All right, let's zero in on one of the cool products that you guys have, which is Codebashing. Give us a primer and a summary of what that is and why it's a good, unique product.
So I'm approaching 2 years with the company. 2 years prior to my arrival in 2017, Checkmarks acquired a company called Codebashing. The tagline, it's a learning application platform. It's built within the tools. Could also do a standalone, if you will, being able to run without Checkmarks tools. The best way to describe it, kind of in layman's terms, is the fact is if I'm an application developer and I'm coding, and as I'm coding, I come across and I've run my scan and it comes up with an error and it tells me there's a problem. Well, if I don't know what that problem is and I don't know how to fix that problem, I have a couple options. I can triage and try to figure it out, by myself, or I could stop coding, stop developing, go enroll in a class and be able to take training online or in person. What we decided is we need to have embedded in training, just-in-time training, while you're developing the code. So you, Garrett, as the programmer, you're banging away, you run your scan, oh, here's a problem, here's a SQL injection. Immediately Codebashing kicks off and says, in a game-like fashion, I guess is the fun way to make this training possible is it immediately puts you through a series of quizzes and tests to be able to help you understand how to fix that problem, but then also educate you so when it comes up again, you're able to then speed your time to mitigating the future risks to it. So my opinion is pretty slick because it's one that I know many business owners don't have the time to be able to pay for someone to stop production or stop development and go enroll in a class, which is time sensitive, but also funding as well as it's not thought of. But also there's a tremendous pressure on that developer that, even personal pressure. How in the world did you code this with putting a problem in there? Why did you do this? Well, this is the get out of jail free card, because you're immediately within the application, within the Checkmarks solution is be able to get on the job training, if you will, right then to be able to address the problem.
Okay, great. So it's maybe a poor man's example would be like, over the years, I've done a little bit of electrical work, either on the farm or at my house, but I was rewiring a few rooms in my house, and I'd almost rather get shocked than have it not work and be embarrassed with everyone being like, oh, you should have hired an electrician. So it's pull up a quick YouTube video or pull up an ACE hardware pamphlet from the 90s and making sure I'm doing it right with a little bit of confidence. But each time I, pull open the pamphlet or pull open the YouTube video, I do have a little bit more confidence. So it's a little bit similar to that, right? Like, I'm not stopping and going to the community college and a technical school. I'm just like getting enough.
Garrett, I'm going to have to send you royalties because I'm going to use that example there in my next conversation with the customer because that's spot on, right? Yeah, and again, having some of my own electrical wiring experiences, you start testing things and going, well, let's see, oh, that shocked me, or well, that's too positive, a negative and a positive. But yeah, you're right. It would be just the fact is your example would be as a YouTube video would come up and go, oh, you're trying to do a GFCI outlet in the bathroom. This is how it should be wired, and in the future, this is what you should be looking for, that type of thing. So, and it does it, and like I say, Codebashing does it in a gaming fashion. So again, the idea there is not to make this lecture form, but more of the fun gaming, if you will. That yeah, I'm 50 years old, but I have a few video games I still like to play. So
Yeah.
it's an area we kind of focus on.
Yeah, because people take pride in the work they're doing, and there's nothing worse than kind of being on an island by yourself without the answer. So it's interactive and fun, and it kind of gets the competitive juices flowing a little bit, in that it's gamified, right?
Yeah, I'd give you two other examples of how this code bashing tool is used. One area is we're seeing it now being used in the hiring process of hiring a developer, being able to put them through a series of games or tests to be able to test their knowledge around a language. Because very quickly we can go to community college, go to university, learn online, and be take a class and say I'm a Java programmer, I'm certified.
Right.
Well, how did you we got to be able to prove that, right? Versus just assume that you took the classes and you passed it. So that's one direction. The other direction that we're seeing, and we're seeing this in the university space, but we've turned this into what we call tournaments in terms of a gaming fashion where a problem is developed, it's sent out to a group, and they use code bashing to be able to solve the problem, if you will. So it's an area where I guess contestants, if you will play with it. So we've done this recently at Texas A&M down in Southern Texas, and then just agreed to yesterday, Carnegie Mellon is going to start to use our software in the classroom. So pretty household names that are using the software to work with students to be able to, again, get them ready for the public service world, corporate world, but also do it in a way that it's not a lecture, it's not a textbook.
Yeah, that makes it a lot funner. And as I mentioned previously, there's a lot of languages, and code bashing. Does it work with the various languages for building any application?
The answer is it's always growing, Garrett. It started out with initial variety of languages. One thing that we at Checkmarks take great pride in is continuing to add libraries of languages to the tool. So it's an area where we sell our solutions as a subscription. So it's not something that you buy and per se you're stuck with in its shelfware. If you're using it and we're adding value to it by continuing to expand the use of the tool, you keep using it, and you're healthy. Sign up for that subscription. Vice versa, if you're no longer the application is no longer there, or it's not being used, it's been sunsetted, you stop using the subscription software.
Gotcha. So if you're a CTO of a growing startup or even a bigger enterprise company, this would be a good thing for you to implement with your developers, because I assume you can kind of see progress and see who's doing well and see who's still stuck on certain things. Is that correct?
Sure. I think you can use this if I'm let's just take a startup or someone that's wanting to do business. And then again, I'll talk specific public sector, but that's just my background. Certainly be applicable to the commercial world as well. If I'm trying to win a bid, win a contract where I want to develop an application for, University of Utah, Utah State, what have you, as I want to be able to go in and say, I can build you this application and I can verify that this is sound in terms of the code to be developed with. So in my build, in my solution, I will use a tool such as Checkmarks SaaS solution and or combination with our code bashing solution. it's a credibility factor, but it also shows that you got the forethought that you've thought the entire life cycle of the application. So um, it's the challenge I think that you have is there is an investment in the tools, and being able to get the in-state business unit or customer to understand that you've invested in those tools to be able to be a certified electrician in your example a few minutes ago. And so it's a credibility factor. What's lost is there's such demand that, or such an expectation that is, I as the university or state institution would be able to say, I want this application built, and I want it built with no vulnerabilities. There's the checks and balances of not then specifically requiring that you go use a tool. So if I'm an end user or an agency university, I would certainly suggest that it be in the requirements, in their RFP, in their the build out, that there's a testing tool that's used, but then also that testing tool comes with a learning tool as Codebashing to be able to ensure that that the application is developed properly, but then also the handoff when that application goes into production, and now you need to have government employees to be able to continue the life cycle of maintaining that application.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Couple more questions. So I'm not an engineer and I don't code anything, but when I do interact with them, sometimes it's they pick up a project or a new role and they'll look at the code and be like, what is this? Or this is just a dumpster fire. Why did they do it like this? Why did they do it like that? Would code bashing help with that, like a standard of uniformity where it looks similar, even though it's coming from different brains?
Well, so wouldn't be code bashing specifically, but our SaaS solution, which is our static, application security testing tool, it would run a report and tell you the vulnerabilities that they're in there. It would tell you the quality of the code. It would tell you, the false positives, false negatives that are in the code. So it can quickly run as a one-time scan and tell you how healthy your application code is. The challenge of only running it once is you really don't get the benefit of knowing. That's kind of a snapshot in time versus your electrician example a few minutes ago is somebody now testing the electrical outlet after you've done the work, right? And did they check again 6 months from now to see that the wire nut didn't fall off and it's still working? So kind of the most basic of examples, but yeah, that's exactly what would need to be done.
Gotcha. Yeah, my house is not burnt down yet, so that's one way of checking, but not a good way.
That's a great test, but that's also the flip side is you have equipment in your house that's probably annually inspected, or it should be, and probably the outlets in your house are probably not the thing that's probably checked, but unless one stops working. But in the world of applications there's constant development, constant enhancements that are being made. So that means the code is constantly being adjusted. And so if you're not constantly testing it, then you're only as secure as the last time you tested.
Yeah. All right, last question, and I often ask this during this podcast. It's the meat and potatoes part of the podcast. And so, Randall, how do you manage your days and your time with tools that require software or exercise or family time? How do you kind of structure your days that other people might glean a little bit of information from?
That's a great question, and maybe as I answer this will be a reinforcement of what I should be doing as I set out on the day. So, working for an international company, my time starts very differently, and then managing a team across the U.S. They're 12-hour days, but I don't work 12 straight. I have pockets in there that I carve out. I have a carve out time that I work out in the morning. I got a carve out time when I walk the dog. That carve out time when I time for lunch, and even in the evening for whatever family things that we want to do. So Outlook is and that's not an advertisement for for Microsoft, but it is the tool that saves my life. It runs runs my life, if you will. But also I think one thing that's very important to do and is being able to plan out further, right? In terms of not just wake up each day and triage where we're going to go. So a bad habit that I'm working to break is first thing that I do first thing in the morning is I look at email, right? And what we've certainly implemented, given where we've been over the past 18 months, is the first thing I do is I get a cup of coffee, and frankly, I started drinking coffee this year for the first time in my entire life. But that's an area where that's where I started my day: walking the dog, exercise, then we'll check email. Yeah.
That's smart. Cool. Yeah, thank you again, Randall. Appreciate you joining Silicon Slopes podcast from across the country, and learned a lot. And I'm glad that there's innovative new tools that are helping developers make things safer for everyone.
Great, Garrett. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Thanks.